Oh, hello, and welcome to Nerd Today's Decay, celebrating births and beginnings, everything important since the dawn of time. November 24th edition, and somehow, possibly, I haven't done this one before. That's crazy, because it's a really good one. I can't believe that's true, but I couldn't find it in my archives. On this day in 1859, Charles Darwin published Origin of Species today. Evolution is really interesting, mysterious, and, you know, science is cool. Embrace science, ladies and gentlemen. Children of all ages, science. Not just science, but science fiction, because Mr. Sci-Fi himself was born today in 1916. That's one Forrest J. Ackerman, of Famous Monsters magazine. Coined the term sci-fi, was the brainchild who never grew up, who made Famous Monsters magazine in delivering Halloween to newsstands for children of all ages for decades and decades and decades, starting in the 50s and going onwards, inspiring all sorts of people to embrace their imagination, to give voice to the imagination, as one of his early fanzines was titled. What is there to say about Forrest J. Ackerman? Would the world be anything like what we're familiar with without Forrest J. Ackerman? I don't know. I mean, he was the person that coined the term sci-fi, as I mentioned, but more than that, he introduced science fiction and horror and literature of a imaginative and weird fiction type to children from the 50s onwards that otherwise wouldn't have had access to it. This is before these films were on television. He was presenting all of the stills that he had been amassing, film stills, throughout his life, in these Famous Monsters magazines. This is not actually a Famous Monster magazine. This is his original notes for Famous Monsters #1. You see here, this was a giveaway or whatever at his 90th birthday party. Yeah. What else can I tell you about him? Grew up with Ray Bradbury and Ray Harryhausen. Was seeing like original, it was right there at the very beginning of science fiction and classic monster movie fandom in the 20s and 30s. Was the first person to experiment with cosplay, showing up and walking the streets of New York City in 1939 as the Raymond Massey, right? Character from The Shape of Things to Come, the H.G. Wells futuristic sci-fi film. Creator of Vampirella, the magazine, the character, you name it. But really, like, introduced, say, like Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers to the likes of George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Inspired Stephen King to start writing, Rick Baker, Monster Maker, to like create his own monster makeup. And it birthed a million dreams of like kids wanting their own Ackermansion. He had a classic monster museum in his house that he would give free open house guided tours of every Saturday for over 50 years, where he would just give these tours and tell stories about how, you know, you can shake the hand that shook the hand of Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi and Fritz Lang, and in the process connecting with, like, you know, these legends. And I guess, and I was one of those people that got one of those tours later in his life. A bunch of times. I basically lived on his couch for a bit near the end of his life. And so there is this line, there's this like direct line of like person to person connections that can go back. I mean, he would tell stories about how one of the kids he grew up with when he was a child, their family several generations back had seen or witnessed Abraham Lincoln giving a speech, and they did their best to reenact what his voice would have sounded like, and in the process, like, continue this communications chain over the generations at a time when this stuff otherwise wasn't able to be recorded. And his comparison to that, I guess, I'm not saying that correctly, but his version of this would be that he was able to see H.G. Wells speak in person, and so gave his interpretation of, and today I'm going to talk to you for 1 hour and 30 minutes, and East will meet West, and they are coming together with a kaboom, or something like that. I think that's my Forey interpretation of H.G. Wells' interpretation, and in the process you could shake the hand that shook the hand of H.G. Wells, and who did H.G. Wells meet? And you could connect this back to, like, Charlie Chaplin and, I don't know, people going back, for generations, like, one link to another, to, like, eventually you get to, like, the pharaohs of old in ancient Egypt or something like that, if you were really to, like, connect the dots, which is just, like, super fun to think, that, like, in the end, we were all just one human chain dating back to the very beginning of civilization and beyond. Yeah. Anyway, Forey was magical, and also grew up with the early occultists on the West Coast who really were inspired to shape the world in their own likeness. Much like what we're doing here with these Today's Decays, is shaping the world in our own likeness, my own likeness. And, thanks for following along. That's why you've got the likes of Anton LaVey creating the Church of Satan to, like, make it all about him. And Forey, with his basically church of classic monster movie memorabilia and Marlene Dietrich and Metropolis and all sorts, was his own church to what his gods were, what he worshipped. And that by having these every Saturday morning tours of his house where he would repeat over and over again stories about Bela Lugosi and Dracula and Lon Chaney Sr. And you tell these stories over and over again, and it becomes like a religious experience where you're just cementing how important these tales are, these connections to the world outside of your own brain, to have them live on. I mean, how is that not exactly what, like, the religious experience is in a more traditional sense? I don't know. So, I mean, he grew up with Curtis Harrington, Jack Parsons, Cameron the Witch, Anton LaVey, and all these people were experimenting in their own way to, like, expand their minds and redefine the universe and their world and life as we know it, as their own likeness. And Forey sure did that. He shaped the world, whether you realize it or not, in his own likeness. So yeah, thanks for all that and much, much more, Mr. Forrest J. Ackerman. Freddie Fingers Lee, also born today in 1937, pounding piano player from England, one-eyed boogie boy himself, really terrific. If you're unfamiliar with Freddie Fingers Lee, go check him out. He will, like, light himself on fire and destroy his piano with an axe on a regular basis. I don't know where he got all these pianos from, but he's really good. He's really good. What else? I don't know how Freddie Fingers Lee got away with it. It's as if he was made of money, much like D.B. Cooper, who there was the D.B. Cooper hijacking incident, which occurred today in 1971. And Bobby Steele, on this day, November 24th, first tried out for the Misfits on this day in 1978. To me, ringing in like the golden age of the Misfits. The Bobby Steele era Misfits. Yeah. And that is everything that happened today on November 24th for you to shape your life around. Now you understand what this is all about? Yeah. It's about magic. Till tomorrow. Goodbye.